An old tugboat sat still at the dock in Louisiana, its scorched wooden hull covered in moss and rust. A faded American flag dangled from a broken antenna, and beneath the grime, the name was barely legible. The Mercy Belle. Sam Ortiz, a single mother and a mechanic, had just inherited the vessel from a grandfather she had never met. A war veteran once listed by the military as AWOL. Stepping onto the deck, she found a list, 12 names, MIA, and a handwritten message. If you're reading this, don't let them be forgotten again. Stay with us if you believe some truths deserve to be brought into the light. And if you want to follow stories that dare to confront memory, hit subscribe so you won't miss what's behind America's forgotten doors. Sam Ortiz had never met her grandfather. In her memory, the name Ramon Ortiz only came up once, when she was 10, and her mother was folding laundry, muttering almost to herself. My parents died twice, once when the war took them, the second time when they never came back and never explained. Then she called him a deserter, a man who ran from the honor of the military. Sam didn't dare ask anything more. Now, at 32, Sam was a single mother. Every morning, she drove her 9-year-old son, Ethan, to school in a beat-up Chevy, then returned to the boat shop where her hands would soak in engine grease till sundown. She once had a technical scholarship at a state college, but a car accident and a stack of medical bills wiped out every plan. She had never broken the law, never faked welfare claims, even when she was hungry enough to split her lunch with her son. "Mom, they said Grandpa was a soldier," Ethan said one day, holding a Captain America comic. Was he a hero? She didn't know how to answer. Then one afternoon, as Sam was beneath a boat with a faulty rudder, her phone rang. Unknown number. A man's voice came through, so polite it made her wary. "Are you Samantha Ortiz?" Who's asking?" "I'm Brent Callahan, legal representative for the estate of Mr. Ramon Ortiz. According to records, he was your grandfather." Sam nearly dropped her wrench. "Excuse me, my grandfather went missing in 1973. "Correct, he's now officially declared deceased. As per his will, you are the sole heir." She laughed in disbelief. "What did he leave me? An old box of ammo?" "A tugboat named the Mercy Belle, currently impounded at Port Lucian. Also, a handwritten letter and a list. According to him. If she reads this, she'll understand." That night, after Ethan fell asleep, Sam Googled Operation Riverlight. Only vague results came up. Leaked documents, conspiracy theories, and old articles about the disappearance of 12 American soldiers in Vietnam, 1972. Nothing concrete, but it didn't feel random either. She opened the lawyer's attached photo, a weathered wooden boat, cracked hull, fogged windows, frayed mooring rope. Below the boat's name was a dark red smear, like someone had tried to scrub away dried blood. Sam stared at it all night. She didn't know if it was curiosity, anger, or a gut feeling, but she knew one thing. If she didn't get on that boat, maybe no one would ever remember those lost names again. Rain drizzled as Sam and Ethan arrived in Port Lucian, a town along the Mississippi where the grass grew taller than the road signs, and rusted tin roofs echoed like distant gunfire. The boat sat at dock number 6. It didn't look like an inheritance. It looked like a relic long abandoned, leaning to one side, its wooden hull peeling like diseased skin. A tattered American flag hung sideways at the bow, soaked by rain, its stars pressed against the gray wood. Ethan clung to her sleeve. "I don't want to go up there." "Just for a little while," Sam said. "Then I'll know what to do." She entered a row of container offices near the dock, knocking on the one with a weathered sign. "Clay, dockmaster." The man who answered looked about 70, gray-haired and wearing a torn sailor shirt, but he stood straight like a mast. "Ramon?" he asked before Sam could introduce herself. "My grandfather." "I guess so." He nodded slowly, squinting. "No one's touched that boat in 30 years. You're the first to ask." "Guess I don't know what I'm supposed to be scared of." "Not fear," he said, hesitating. "Some things you think are forgotten are actually hidden." He handed her the key to the main cabin. "I served in Nam, too. I had friends who didn't come back. Maybe your grandfather carried someone with him." As Sam stepped onto the boat, the wooden deck groaned beneath her, like something that didn't want to be awakened. Ethan stayed close, his raincoat soaked through. Inside the cabin was a mix of age and abandonment. The leather helm seat was torn. The VHF radio lay covered in dust. A steel locker was sealed with a military padlock. Sam swept her flashlight across the room. She noticed the left wall was slightly longer than the right, though the floor was straight. She knocked. Hollow. "This part's off," she muttered. "What is it, Mom?" Something someone didn't want seen. While exploring a side compartment, Ethan called out, "Mom, I found something!" He held out a U.S. military badge, a star with faded letters, 716th River Transport Co. "Did Grandpa wear this?" Sam took it, her eyes stopping on a yellowed photo in a cabinet. 12 men in uniform, standing in front of a board that read, "Operation Riverlight, Deployment Briefing, Nove, 1972. One of them matched a name from the list she'd seen. Another was a young man standing beside the Mercy Belle, curly hair, dark eyes, army jacket. He looked exactly like her father in old photos. Sam scanned the old cabin. It wasn't just wood and steel anymore. It was a voice, one that never got the chance to speak. When Sam got home the next day, a black SUV was already waiting by the curb. A man stepped out, neat gray suit, slicked back salt and pepper, hair, small dark sunglasses, the kind you only see in Homeland Security movies. "Ms. Ortiz?" "Depends who's asking." "I'm Calvin Briggs. I represent an interested party regarding the vessel you recently inherited." "That rusted tugboat?" "Precisely. But as you know, appearances don't always reflect true value." Briggs handed her a thick envelope. Inside was a transfer of ownership contract for the Mercy Belle and a check neatly written for $75,000. A goodwill payment. "You don't have to decide now. But consider this." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Your grandfather was once a hero. Now he's a stain. You don't want your son carrying that legacy. Trust me." The words hit a place Sam thought she'd armored long ago. After Briggs left, she sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the envelope and the water-stained refrigerator. Ethan's dental bill lay on the counter, a misaligned jaw that needed early correction to prevent speech problems. Total cost, about $6,400. No insurance. No payment plan. A dull thunk came from the steel box she'd brought home from the boat. Inside was the half-burned journal from 1973. She opened to a middle page, the handwriting pressed hard into the paper. Each gold bar is a life, each file a soul, and silence, the third accomplice to every crime. Sam stood up abruptly. By dusk, she was back aboard the Mercy Belle, carrying her toolkit, flashlight, and an old crowbar. The cabin was dark, quiet as an abandoned chapel. She traced her hand along the uneven wall and tapped lightly. The sound rang hollow. Carefully, she loosened the wooden bolts and pried at the sealed planks. Behind them lay a military-grade steel panel, faintly etched with DOD Tactical Seal 1972. Under her flashlight, every welded seam showed like stitches on human skin. She slipped off her gloves and pulled back a rotted canvas. Beneath it, row after row of metal bars appeared. Not shining, but dull, heavy, stamped U.S. Federal Reserve, confidential use. Underneath was a thin leather case. She opened it. Inside were 12 military dossiers and a black and white photo. 12 men in uniform, hands bound, seated against a concrete wall, eyes swollen. Scrawled along the edge in pen, "Riverlight. They were never meant to come home." Sam froze, the flashlight trembling in her grip. Briggs hadn't come for the boat. They'd come for what America didn't want to admit it had left behind. Sam went to St. Martin's Church on a soft, rainy afternoon. The old wooden chapel stood silent between two leafless oaks, its moss-covered roof dripping as if quietly weeping. Father Leo, a Vietnamese-American priest with clouded eyes but an unbent spine, opened the door. He had once been a U.S. Army chaplain in Vietnam in the early 70s and one of the few survivors after his unit was ambushed near Bien Hoa. When Sam laid the faded gold bars and files before him on the tea table, Father Leo stared for a long time without touching them. "You opened that boat?" Sam nodded. "And I think I'm being pulled into something very old and very dirty." He lifted one file, his hands shaking slightly. "Riverlight. I've heard that name. It was classified. We called it the soul-buying mission. Rumor was the Department of Defense planned to use special assets to ransom American POWs held illegally, but the operation was cut off suddenly. No explanation, no questions allowed." He paused, his voice thinning. "Among those prisoners, there was one I baptized before he was moved. I never found out if he lived or died." The air turned colder, though the fireplace still burned. Sam pulled out the photograph of the bound men and laid it before him. Father Leo stared without blinking, then drew the small cross from his neck and placed it atop the picture. "This is where truth and faith stop running parallel. They cross in the place of the forgotten." Tears welled in Sam's eyes, but she held them back. "I have a kid. I have debts. I have nothing but the truth. And if I speak, I could lose everything." Father Leo quietly went to a shelf, took down an old, worn copy of the U.S. Constitution, and placed it in her hands. "Not only soldiers swear to defend this," he read aloud. "We the people hold these truths to be self-evident. You're not a hero," he said gently, "but you're a witness. And in a country like ours, one living witness is enough to keep the dead from being erased." Before she left, Sam took from her bag an old map, her grandfather's note marking a small cove near the Mexican border, circled in red ink. Father Leo studied it, then looked at her. "Seems your grandfather prepared for this day a long time ago." Sam looked at the map, the journal, and her reflection in the glass of the display cabinet. If justice truly had a place in America, maybe it began with a rusted boat and a woman who had nothing left but the truth. Sam returned to the Mercy Belle on Tuesday morning with the keys and a fresh set of tools. But the dock had changed. 2 black SUVs were parked beside Slip 6. A yellow tape reading "Restricted U.S. Government" wrapped around the tugboat like a tightening noose. A man in an FBI uniform stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "This vessel is now under federal investigation. If you continue to approach, you may be detained for obstruction." "Obstruction?" she scoffed. "I'm the legal heir. There are allegations that you are in possession of property belonging to the United States military. and possibly classified documents yet to be debriefed. You should contact a lawyer. On the dock, with the river wind and the drone of tugboats, Sam felt again that America didn't need her, just needed her quiet. That night, as Sam was fixing a leaky pipe under the kitchen sink, the phone rang. Unknown number. She picked up. Silence. Then a low, rasping male voice, almost a whisper. You have a son. Ethan. Public school, 3rd grade. Likes grilled cheese sandwiches. Sits at the second desk from the window. Her hand froze. Who are you? You're playing a game above your pay grade. No one will believe you. No one will protect you. But you? You have a lot to lose. The line didn't click. It dissolved, like a cold blade sliding into her chest. That night, Sam locked every door and taped the windows shut. She pulled out the old pistol she'd found under the boat's cabin, probably her grandfather's, cleaned the rust, and placed it in the drawer beside her bed. For the first time, she thought about walking away. She took a few bars of gold, got fake papers, and disappeared off the map with her son. Let the truth drown, like it always had. Who could blame her? Ethan walked into the kitchen, holding the old military badge. Mom, if Grandpa was a soldier, how come no one ever talks about him? Sam didn't answer. She couldn't. Her throat closed like it was being pulled backwards in time. She opened her grandfather's journal. Once stuck to the back cover, a loose page fell out like fate. If you're reading this page, it means I couldn't finish. But someone still knows. Mateo, the only brother left alive. Find him. He knows the truth, even the part I didn't dare write. At the bottom, a handwritten note, ink smudged. Slip 12, midnight, no names. Sam stuffed the pistol in her bag and slid the files back into her coat. It wasn't dawn yet, but she knew. There was no turning back. Slip 12 sat at the far end of the dock, where the harbor lights cast a yellow sheen across water black as spent oil. Sam arrived on time. No one waited. Just an old silver sailboat, the kind nobody remembered how to launch anymore. As she turned to leave, a gravelly voice called from the shadows. Ramon's granddaughter lacks patience. A man stepped out from the cabin, lean frame, faded army shirt, long silver hair tied back. His left arm ended at the elbow, the scar clean. His eyes were unnervingly sharp. Mateo Alvarez. Sam Ortiz. He said you were the last one who still believed. Inside the cramped sailboat cabin, Sam opened her bag and laid out the files, the photo of the bound soldiers, and the gold bar stamped 1972. Mateo stared for so long, she thought he'd turned to stone. This is all that's left? All my grandfather left me, and maybe too much for someone like me. Mateo lit a cigarette, took a long drag, and exhaled slowly. Riverlight wasn't a prisoner rescue op like they claimed. It was a cover. Gold was diverted from the Federal Reserve, shipped onto our vessels, sent to Southeast Asia. Not to save anyone, but to buy silence from the men who betrayed their own. Sam's breath caught. My grandfather knew? Mateo nodded. He was ordered to deliver it. But when he found out what it was for, he did what almost no one would. He turned around. Cut contact. Hid the gold. Disappeared. He knew if he ever talked, no one would live to hear it. He pulled a small USB, sealed in a plastic pouch, from his shirt pocket. A recording he sent me in case he couldn't speak for himself. And photos. The faces no one will ever admit existed. Sam looked at the screen on her phone. The faces were all American. Buzz cuts, bruised, hands tied. One of them looked a little too much like Ethan. "I'm not an activist," she whispered. "I just want to raise my son. I don't want to become a target." Mateo stared at her. Ramon didn't want to be a keeper of secrets either. But when a whole generation gets erased for political stability, someone has to hold the light. You can walk away. You've got enough gold to vanish. Or you can release it all and accept that you'll be watched, threatened, maybe lose everything. Sam looked down at the photo. 12 forgotten soldiers. 12 lives were bought in silence. Maybe just one voice is enough to bring them home. Mateo gave a sad smile. And that rusted tugboat turns out to be the final warship in this battle. The next morning, Sam sat in a small cafe by the harbor, her old laptop open beside a USB drive holding Mateo's testimony, MIA photos, and the Riverlight files. She clicked upload, sending them to 3 places. Mei Ling, an investigative journalist, was fired years ago for telling the truth. The POW MIA Memorial Foundation, a veterans organization that honors the missing. And Attorney Callahan, who helped her inherit the Mercy Belle, now offers to represent her for free. 12 hours later, Mei Ling's article went live. Blood Gold and Buried Names. The Untold Story of Operation Riverlight. It spread faster than Sam ever imagined. Thousands of shares. Hundreds of veterans speaking out. The hashtag #RiverlightTruth topped Twitter for 48 straight hours. People began asking, who gave the order? Who kept the gold? And why has no one ever apologized? Briggs called back on the 3rd day. Sam answered. His voice wasn't calm anymore. It was sharpened like steel on steel. "You think you're winning?" "No," Sam said. "I'm not playing to win. I'm just done losing to silence. You just signed your son's death warrant. And you just confirmed you're exactly the man who deserves to be exposed." A heavy exhale, and the line went dead. Sam stared at her phone, remembering Mateo's words. "When they start to fear you, you're doing something right." Sam held a small memorial by the river that Sunday, where the Mercy Belle had once been moored. No cameras, no microphones, just 12 military dog tags engraved with the names she'd found aboard the ship. She asked Father Leo to read a prayer. Ethan stood beside her, handing out white candles one by one, placing them gently on the water. The breeze was soft. Each flame drifted downriver like a freed soul. An old veteran from another state, leaning on a cane, whispered to her, "Thank you. I served with one of them. 50 years, and nobody dared say his name." Sam's voice trembled, but her words were steady. Now their names are written again, not on stone, but in memory. She didn't know what waited ahead. Maybe subpoenas, maybe silence, maybe no apology at all. But she knew one thing for sure. A vow once broken was finally being kept. 6 months after the memorial, Sam lived in a small wooden house behind a civilian boat repair shop on the outskirts of Baton Rouge. No sign on the door. No interviews. Just river wind, the clang of hammers, and the smell of motor oil. She never became a symbol. She didn't need to. The people who once called her that grease-stained girl now nodded quietly when they passed. They didn't say much, but everyone knew. Sam had done what most only dreamed of. Ethan went to school like any other kid, more fascinated by history than ever. One afternoon, he asked, "Mom, was Grandpa a hero?" Sam paused, wiping sweat from her brow. "No. He was just someone who refused to pretend he didn't see. Like me." The Mercy Belle had been restored and placed in the Louisiana Veterans Heritage Museum, near where it once moored. The scorched hull was left untouched, a scar of history that wasn't meant to heal. Along the deck ran a string of brass lights. Every night at 8 p.m., they lit up one by one. 12 lights for 12 names once lost under MIA. A small plaque near the helm read, "The Mercy Belle, where silence ended and memory began." One golden afternoon, Sam took Ethan to visit the ship. They stood by the railing. The breeze was warm. The river is calm. Ethan held her hand. "You know, Mom, I think I want to fix boats too, but war boats." "All right," she smiled. "But learn to fix the things you can't see too." "Like what?" "Honor and memory." That night, after Ethan fell asleep, Sam took out an envelope. Inside, a handwritten letter. She placed it in her safe beside her grandfather's old military badge. The letter read, "If one day you find the Mercy Belle, don't think of her as wood and steel. She is legacy, oath, and the voice of those who can no longer speak. Proof that you don't need power to stand for truth." She signed it in blue ink, Sam Ortiz, mechanic. Mother, keeper of promises. Then she stepped out onto the porch, sat in the creaky wooden chair, and poured herself a cup of cold tea. Far off, against the night sky, the Mercy Belle glowed again. Not with gunfire, but with the light of names no longer forgotten. Sam Ortiz didn't keep the gold. She kept her word. In a nation that once forgot the names of 12 soldiers, she chose not to stay silent and helped bring them home, not in body, but in truth. She needed no medal, no fame. But because of her, the Mercy Belle now shines, not to light the way forward, but to illuminate a nation's conscience. If you believe truth deserves to be told to the end, share this story. Subscribe and help keep the flame of justice burning for the names still waiting to be called.